Resolution 2020-61, acquisition of real property. We have a couple supervisors that are leaving at 1 o'clock, so we want to make sure we get this one out.
She did last time.
Dan?
Go ahead. I'll make a motion to pass it.
I'll second it.
Discussion.
If you don't mind, I'm just gonna, with all the stuff, I'll try to be as brief as I can, but this vote requires a supermajority. So I think I just need to spend, by supermajority, that needs to be 14 votes. So I do want to give it this a little bit of time. So I hope you can just bear with me. I'll try to be brief, but I do want to at least provide some background. So I'll try to keep it concise. So here's what we're talking about. So we're talking about a government services building on Washington Island. Most of the building will be housed for emergency services, but it also will be accommodating for other departments. Other departments that would be potential users, for example, would be the sheriff, human services, health, land use services, and so forth. This is the context. Let me describe why we're here, or the need and background, just so you understand it. In 2019, we actually took over our service on Washington Island. You can see that on handout A, which I handed out to you. And even at that time, going all the way back to 2000, and that was one that's actually handed out or passed out. You'll see it was a resolution, or not a resolution, I'm sorry, a letter that was put together. Actually, I have it backwards. I'm sorry. It was a resolution in 2000. I'm sorry. Let me restart because I just I'm trying to rush. I should have figured out. Okay, so again, Exhibit A is actually a letter dated November 24th, 2009 that actually outlines the, I guess, the agreement between us in terms of how we operate the ambulances going forward. So I just want to give context for that. Since 2009, both the county and the town have been working together in terms of designing what the future needs were for facilities. Again, given the age of the existing facility and also the space. I believe it's over 70 years old. Supervisor Donaldson can confirm that for me. In terms of, just really quick, this in terms of location, so we're all on the same page. What we're talking about today, I'll just show it up on the screen. The existing location is right here on the corner of Airport Road and Town Line Road. It actually houses their existing public works facility. And then these two small buildings here, what I think considered both their fire and our current EMS location. The other locations we'll be talking about is across the street, this 10-acre piece here, and then the existing dairy or lavender farm is right here, just for context. The true discussions, though, in terms of a joint facility probably started to take shape in 2016. I'm going to go through chronological order. And then through those discussions, both with the town and also working through at that time the Emergency Services Committee, we actually, and also through the planning in terms of our fiscal documents, by October of 2017, we actually put aside $500,000 under Resolution 2017-65. And that's actually provided on page 37 of your packet as reference. So that takes you up to the end of 2017. In 2018, once we passed that resolution, we actually started to look at various options for both land and existing buildings. While some were initial options, we did not find anything to, I guess, pursue at that time in terms of either building or land. I guess also, this is a key point, also in 2018, under the leadership of their new town chairman, we started to learn about the financial condition of the town. And by June of 2018, we had received an official resolution from the town asking that we find a new location. This was done in collaboration with the town, and it was a friendly, I consider it as a friendly resolution. It wasn't something that we got kicked out, but it was a thing that we went through this process and we determined that they did not have the capacity to move forward. And they were giving us a clear communication saying that please proceed, please find your space. We would like to expand and use the building entirely to ourselves for our fire department. The county board at that same time, again, showing that was collaboration, that we did also pass a matching resolution, which is that's the one that's attached. That's item B, which is resolution 2018-40. Again, that resolution, if you look at it, again, talks about how we are hoping to work collaboratively together moving forward. But we do understand that the facilities are over 70 years old, and we need to, I guess, move forward in terms of finding a new location. Again, we're trying to be very collaborative in our communications with both the town and the county in terms of moving forward. Then in July, we were contacted by an individual that was interested in purchasing and then donating the land for a county facility. That piece of land is this 10 acres here that I'm showing up on the screen with a cursor. As part of that donation, he wanted to ensure that the town would be provided the opportunity to not only, the town could also locate on that piece of property, but as his condition or the donor's conditions, they also wanted to have full site plan review in terms of making sure that the building could be jointly added on and used. Through those negotiations going back and forth, that I can defer to Grant in terms of how that proceeded. We never reached a formal agreement. There was always some issues in terms of the conditions applied to the donation that we were not comfortable with. So that is still, I guess, in my mind, on hold, that potential donation. But again, if you look at where we were about mid-2018, and then we started to transition into 2019. Where we were then contacted by the owner of the lavender farm who was interested in selling his building, which again is an old former dairy building that was restored. This information was presented to the Finance and Property Committee, and it is recommended that the full county board tour the building and also view the 10-acre property. Along with that tour, we actually had shared what the scope of the project would be. And that was presented on page 41. And that was handed out at the tour to all the supervisors as part of the tour. As part of that tour, this is also a key point. We also had a meeting with town officials, then again, a new town chairman. And we confirmed that we would be proceeding on the project on our own. But we also confirmed that the town, should the financial conditions change in the future, we're probably out 10 plus years, but they still would like to have some consideration that they might be able to build or locate on the same piece of property. This tour occurred in October of 2019, just in terms of following the timeline. It should be noted that as part of the CIP, we added an additional $300,000 to the reserves for this project. You'll note, and I included on page 38, you will see that we actually had planned to put aside $500,000, but we reduced it down to $800,000. I think there's been some confusion saying that bug cost $800,000, so there was only going to be $800,000 for Washington Island. I think we had known from the very get-go that this was going to be more than $800,000 project. And again, we were at that time, just because of our financial stuff or how we're doing the CIP, we simply reduced it from $500,000 to $300,000. But again, we've had, I guess, I have to make sure we had a clear intention of that this would probably be more than $800,000. So I want to make that disconnect between the Southern Door project and this one. Then in January of 2020, the county board authorized that we would look at both the 10-acre parcel and also the existing building to find the best approach of whether or not we should pursue a new property with, i.e. a new building, or renovating the existing building. So that brings us up into more of the content that's been provided. We hired the Sanderson Group, and their full report starts on page 46. The items that I will point out, they're very thorough in the report, but if you go to the report on page 49 and 50, it again, it's all highlighted in yellow in that packet, but again, it describes the scope of what they felt their work was. And that scope of work matched the memo that was handed out at the October tour for this project. Now I'm going to kind of accelerate this for timing's sake, but I'm just going to cut to the chase. So really, I guess the results of the study, there's tons of detail there. But the first option is obviously the new building on a 10-acre piece of property. It's about 5,300 square feet. The projected price is $2.5 million in terms of construction. And it does not include the land price. Now that land price could still be donated, or we're estimating that the purchase price would be about $75,000. So you're in at that number, if there you could say just under 2.6 million for that option. The second options are that were considered to be the existing building. Under what they considered the option one was to leave the deck if you were out on the tour, but you knew there was a deck on the back that was tried to be preserved. That building option ended up at 8,600 square feet, and the price with the property included was 1.95 million. Again, I'm not going to go into the layout of the building. Both the layout for the new building is on page 54. The layout for the existing option one is on page 59. But again, the intent, or I guess the goal today is not to get into the, this room shouldn't be here or that kind of thing. If we proceed, we bring an architect on board and they redesign it exactly to our need. But again, the building designs includes all the things that we stated that we like to have in terms of our operation. If you go then to page 127, one of the things that was brought up at Facilities and Parks is that we were trying to just preserve the deck and not design what we truly need in terms of the layout for the ambulances. So they requested that we redesign it, and that was done. And through that work, interesting enough, is that the square footage went down a little bit, even though there's actually more functional space. It ends up at 8,528 square feet, and the project cost at that is 1.85 million. As part of once that study was done, or again, there was initial presentation of facilities and parks. They asked for the addition analysis. We came back, and then it got referred on to finance in terms of with the recommendation of proceeding with the existing building with this, I guess what we consider option two, or the $1.85 million cost. At both, I guess for the discussion's sake, both at Facilities and Park, but then also at Finance, there's always been the question of this as well, can we scale this back? Are we building too much, and is there a way to reduce this? And so what we did is we worked with the Samuelson Group again, and Wayne put together a memo that's provided on page 43 of your packet. So in essence, what we did is we reduced the footprint by about 30%. And we reduced that footprint by about 30%. The price still comes in about $1.45 million plus the acquisition of the land. So we're at $1.53 million in terms of cost. But again, with that, we reduced the building by 30%, and we took out, in this memo, you can see what I would consider important parts of what we would want to have long-term for the property. So that covers the background in terms of the study. The next question was how would we pay for it? What we were working to do is we have about $785,000 in our project reserve. We have $335,000 that was still remaining in our reserve for our community center project, or the ADRC. And we're also recommending that we take $680,000 from our workman's comp fund, which we discussed at finance is actually fully funded. And even with taking those dollars out, we're still fully funded for an additional year. And we have done that in the past with the workman's comp fund. As it gets too large, we draw money out. So it's not a misuse of the funds in that fashion. The other part of the question that came up both at Facilities and Parks and also Finance Committee is operating costs. And obviously we cannot provide the exact operating costs for you today. We do feel that while there is a cost, it can be done in a cost-effective manner. In talking with both Aaron, in terms of their operations, crews and / users would be cleaning the building as it's used. And existing maintenance staff, in talking with Wayne, and he's here, will probably do what they do for the other facilities is they schedule time to do a deep cleaning, is what I would call, maybe like twice a year. The only thing that would probably get contracted out would be the grass cutting and the snow plow during the winter. But again, at this point in time, we're not creating any new debt with this project, nor are we using any of our undesignated fund reserve based on how we're projecting to finance it. Some other things is in terms of notables that stood out is obviously that the quality and the construction of the existing building needs to be noted. In that, in speaking with the owner, they invested over $2 million into the restoration of the building. And if you were a new member, but when we toured it, you did know just the quality of the materials and everything that was done in that building. It is in very, very good condition. And even when they did their analysis, there's nothing that stood out in terms of things that need to be replaced or fixed in terms of the exterior. Obviously, with this building, it's a larger footprint, and there's the training room or the, I guess what they consider the large room upstairs in the drawing in the layout. But it does provide the ability to use the building for other potential uses just besides the training. And again, there was one concept of maybe someday you have the library set up there similar to what you have in Egg Harbor. Not that I'm promoting that, but I'm just saying there's other potential uses that we have that could be a neat function in terms of that being a facility for the residents. Likewise, the building does have a strong history. Again, it's a historic building. If you did the tour when you first walk in, there's a whole mosaic of the history of the building itself. So from that standpoint, I think it's notable just to note that it's an important building not only to the island, but to the county in terms of its history. And again, if you look at the drawings in the report, this site still allows for the town at some point in the future to collaborate with us or also co-locate on that site should we choose to move forward that way. So the timing, why it's here for you today, there's two ways we can do it. Again, if we're going to move forward with it today, it requires a supermajority. In other words, I need 14 votes. And the reason why we're bringing it for you today is, again, if we're looking at doing this as a project, if we do it, we acquire it, then we get an architect on board, hopefully this fall and then into early winter, so we can actually get it bid out. And if you're familiar with projects, if you bid out projects early, you can get into the queue, you get better bid prices. So that's why we're looking for possibly your support today. If you're not comfortable with that, and I understand, we can also make it part of the budget process. It does postpone our project into bringing on the architect and everything on board. You're probably looking at a late construction in 2021 for that to occur. And again, depending on the island, might get pushed back even another year. So with that, in terms of the staff recommendations, I guess we're concurring with the recommendation of the facilities and parks. I mean, that's why we brought it forward that way. And one of the things that we were also concerned about is overall costs, and we did feel the same thing: is are we building too much? And we did look at scaling it back. But even when we scale it back, and Wayne can confirm this, we can scale it back, but most of the cost is in the other components, your HVAC, septic, and all the other things. When we scale back, you take out a conference room or even one of the sleeping quarters, you're not taking out the true cost of what the project is. So from our standpoint, we could save money, but I think we're saving money. We're not looking at the long-term needs of what we can provide in terms of our services. So with this proposal or this option here, I think we're providing a long-term solution in terms of providing services on the island, but not only for emergency services, but for other departments in terms of what they need to do. So what's before you today is a resolution that's requesting that we would purchase the property for $800,000. And the resolution outlines the conditions that they had requested. If you're familiar with the property, and I'll go back up to the screen, there obviously the land, and I'll zoom in on this one portion here, just because I'm talking about this one part of the project right now. The existing owners would like to, I guess, maintain or operate the lavender fields for an additional 5 years. I learned that going through the negotiations, lavender plants average about 10 years. So they have to replace those. They're in year 4. They'd ask for additional 5. So they're looking for access to these gardens yet, along with access along the northern part of the road here is where they get their access into the farms. And they're asking for the ability to use this barn here where they keep their equipment. But then after that, it'd be turned over back to the county after that 5 years. The only thing that we would be concerned about if we would make the offer, obviously we go through all the legal stuff through grant, but it'd be contingent upon a conditional use. The zoning does allow for this type of facility to go through, but it's still permitted as a conditional use. And there also would be a variance needed for, if you look at the drawings, the garages for the entrances would be right here with the driveway access. We need a variance for the driveway access. So those would be some of the things we want to look at in terms of the acquisition itself. So I think I covered everything. I apologize for being quick. I'm trying to be cognizant of time, but also being thorough because I think this is an important decision for us.
Questions?
Sorry, I didn't get my button pushed, but thank you. So again, just to be clear, this resolution is just moving towards acquiring the property, not deciding whether we're keeping the deck or not. We're not getting into that level of detail with this decision.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said something about taking some money out of the unemployment reserves.
It's not unemployment, it's called the workman's
The workman's
compensation.
comp.
Yeah,
How much?
680,000.
Okay. If we do that, we're not, you know, I always remember the reports you gave us, how the budget's going to be. We're not hurting ourselves down the line for other budget concerns.
No, actually, and this is one thing we discussed at finance. We have done very well in our workman's comp. Again, we get rated each year. And what we've been talking with both the finance director and also the finance committee, even with taking those funds out, we are still fully funded, even if we have a rate increase for next year. In terms of as a full reserve, we will naturally build in the expenses into our budget for next year. So we actually have what we'll budget for plus a full reserve of a year in our workman's comp. And what we did is I think we've done it twice since I've been here. We try to draw that down. And again, one of the questions might be is why do we keep on getting so much money back? It's based off what we get reported from the state in terms of what we're supposed to charge ourselves for our workman's comp and then we pay for the policy. And again, we always have been performing very well. In other words, we don't have a lot of workplace injuries. So whatever we either save from ourselves in that collection part, but we also have gotten dividend checks back that goes right back into that fund. So this is one of those things where this is actually a good use of those funds. We're not touching anything in terms of reserves or making any long-term capital debts or goals. So it's actually a good use of those funds.
What we've used that in prior years or past years to help out with the budget, where we had kind of budget shortfalls.
Yeah, I think, and again, I think it was either last year or the year before we drew out 400,000, but we've always applied it to a one-time project expense. So we always had the same thing. We took it and applied it just to a KIP item. So this would be kind of a similar thing. We're taking it out one time expense for one KIP item. There's no long-term, I guess, shortage in terms of using the dollars that way.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Dave?
The driveway and some other issues were questionable during the various things. So today you recognize that the zoning would imply that we need to go to conditional use.
Yeah, I mean, in both, it's actually, if you look at the zoning for the property, there's actually a zoning that kind of cuts the property. If you're looking at the screen, it kind of cuts it right along this one set of fields here. So there's zoning for this part and there's a zoning for this part. In either case, the zoning's compatible for allowing that type of use as a conditional use. Right. And again, the variance would be also part of the process in talking with the Land Use Services Department.
So it's not unusual for the county to make a request for zoning changes and stuff like that RPC oversees. We get to the public hearing and so forth or something like that. Procedurally, I'm looking at purely as this, and maybe our council has to answer it. As you know, conditional uses have very finite abilities to be able to allow to do the various things. You would be both the applicant and the entity making the decision. What happens if we have all sorts of people coming in giving legitimate reasons as to why we shouldn't be able to do that at the public hearing?
Ultimately, that's a decision that the Resource Planning Committee would have to make. And if a person or entity were unhappy with the Resource Planning Committee, it would be appealed to the Board of Adjustment. So, and I say this not to encourage the county to do it, but we could also exempt ourselves from our own zoning. There are counties, plenty of counties that have done that. I have advocated that we also, so it makes sense in Door County for the county to subject itself to zoning, and this is not an entirely unusual circumstance, but I'm glad you pointed out it does present sort of an internal conflict, but we're situated to be able to deal with it.
Well, and I'm just looking at it as a procedural thing, but you remind me that the second level of concern would be the Board of Adjustment, which is an independent entity then. It's all made up of citizens, so Not that I would expect a conflict, I just, it's unusual, I haven't been here and had that yet, thank you.
Ken?
Oh, Grant kind of answered. I was going to ask about that since it would have to go to the RPC committee. We're deciding our own issue. Pretty hard to get away from saying there's not a conflict there.
But the county is the entity that decides those issues.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're buying the entire property and they just want use of those fields for 5 years?
That's correct.
So after 5 years, we own it.
Well, you own it all the way through. They're just asking to be able to continue to maintain the fields and operate. They're almost like a tenant, but we wouldn't be charging them. Please.
And after 5 years, it becomes the Wayne Spritka Lavender Farm.
So they would be using the fields, but they wouldn't be paying any taxes on it?
Correct.
Correct.
Well, that's a pretty good deal for them.
Although in defense of that, in terms of the bargaining of the purchase price, it didn't take into account the value of the crops, which we of course have no interest in because we're not in the lavender business. And it actually over that 5 year period I made the joke with Wayne half in jest, but we're going to have significant acreage to maintain after that. And that really is the county from having to worry about maintaining the lavender fields. I'm assuming we would have to convert that to some other use.
Or else if they'd like to continue.
Yeah.
But under a lease agreement.
Anybody else? Not, we will go to our voter.
Again, this is a reminder, this needs a simple majority for it to go forward.
Oh, Dale?
Yeah, the question I have is, don't we have to get the zoning done, or shouldn't we have the zoning done before we purchase it?
Again, that would be part of it. So what we're looking for today is to authorize, in essence, making an offer to purchase. And if they would accept that offer, then you're actually committing to spending those funds. But as part of the offer of the purchase, we would say that we're looking to have those conditions met. And those conditions would be that the conditional use and also the variance would be issued. So that'd go on concurrent. And once those are issued, then that would give us clearance to actually close on the property. So those that have to be executed or in line before it actually close and commit any funds on purchasing the property. So you're protected in that fashion.
So we have no offer out there yet. This is all verbal at this point?
Correct. I have the authority to bring it to you, but the county board has the ability to actually approve or not approve moving forward with making a formal offer for the purchase.
And that's the only property that they own right here. Somebody owns a property next door.
Sorry.
Not them.
Yeah.
They only own this 5 acres.
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah.
All right. And so there's no way to go the other way if we wanted to and not have the lavender fields. This is a piece of property and they have to sell it in one piece according to the zoning, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Vinnie?
I have one and I really don't know enough about workers' compensation, so that's why I'm asking. I'm just wondering about if other counties have had issues with workers' compensation through COVID, and that's why the CARES Act is including it as a component that qualifies. I don't know what those costs might be, but and this is all new, so I'm just trying to ask that before we move forward.
Sure. So if, again, for the workers' comp through the CARES Act, that's more. The Grant's gonna help me a little bit. So if someone would get COVID is, I guess, traced back to their work duty, then they would qualify for the workers' comp. Then that would get filed against what you're paying for as your insurance, and that's paid through the premium you're paying, just like you pay for your insurance. So if we had a significant number of those, the next year, the company's going to come back and say that your ratio as far as workers' comp is going to go from, like, right, it's not going to make sense right now, but let's say we're at like a 0.77, it might go to like a 0.8, and then your rate would go up because of that, as far as what you're paying for. So that's how it works. So, and that's why even with the funds we're recommending, we're actually building in a little bit extra reserve. We haven't had anything related to that. But I guess I still consider we're being very conservative and we're putting ourselves still in a good spot with the workers' comp.
Thank you.
Okay. We will go to the vote now.
Update on the question. He wasn't a keyboard.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
That's okay. Let's go.
He's good. Ready to vote?
Yes.
You see what? There we go. Sorry.
That's passed on a vote of 20 yes, 1 absent. Thank you. Okay, back up to 2020-57, gift grant and or donation to Health Human Services Department approval of community partnerships for diversion from youth justice grant. Megan.
Motion to approve.
Megan, do you want to say anything about it?
I believe Joe is here to comment on it. I believe Joe is here to comment on this. In the room.
He's done. He's done. Do you want to just make a statement on what it is, Joe? You can just bring grab that mic or come up here really quick. Sure.
Sorry, I missed it. Are you on the, where are you at?
Community partnerships to bring the justice there.
Yeah, we received a 151,000 and change grant. It is a youth diversion grant for programming that we were already trying to develop in conjunction with the sheriff. We were already working on this or planning to work on it before COVID came. So this grant pays for 3/5 of the employee position, one that we already had planned to bring in-house. And then with that, we have additional funding to develop some programming over the next year. And that is a potential 5-year grant that recycles. We have to apply each year, but it's not a competitive grant process as it was this year.
Questions for Joe? If not, we'll go to our votes.
You'll just confirm your vote.
That's passed on a vote of 19 yes, 2 absent. Resolution 2020-58, gift grant and or donation to the Health and Human Services Department. Approval of supplemental alcohol and other drug abuse block grant funds. Megan.
Motion to approve resolution 2058. So the chair is certified.
Second.
This was a small grant, $5,000 that we could use towards upgrading computers, Surface Pro, so that our staff could do remote therapy.
Questions, Vinny?
I just want to say thank you for applying to both of these grants. I know it takes a lot of work to apply and then implement them, so thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then we'll go to our vote. That's passed on a vote of 19 yes, 2 absent. Thanks, Joe. Resolution approving participation in the Green Tier Legacy Community Program. Jenny,
I would make a motion to approve resolution 2020-59, the Green Tier Legacy.
okay, there's a motion and a second. Any explanation?
Sure. The Green Tier program is through the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, and it's a program that communities can sign up for either as a smaller municipality or as a county. County of reference has also done this is Bayfield County. And what the program is it's based on a score sheet that is a way to identify efficiencies within a county as it regards to the environmental health, well-being of the community. The Sustainability Committee really wanted to use this as a cornerstone piece of our work as a committee to take a look at where the county is right now with sustainability and then to see where we can move forward. One of the services that's offered in the Green Tier program is a energy audit, which would give us a good idea of where we can make improvements in reducing the cost of energy that we spend as a county, which is obviously good for the budget, but also good for the environment. And if any of the other committee members want to add to some of that work, it's the committee's taking a little bit bigger scope than that overall, but we think it's a really good guiding source to move forward. There's been some basic questions of Ken has sent some basic inventory kind of questions to department heads to see where they are sitting with sustainability in general. And then the score sheet is an opportunity to relook at that each year. It involves having an annual report that you put out, which I think as our first annual report will really highlight for the community some of the sustainable things the county is already doing that maybe don't get much publicity because they just are part of the operations already. And then it will give us a good guiding way to move forward. Thank you.
Questions, everybody? Oh, right.
Yes, I believe the administrator gave us a great presentation on this once before. Was that last year?
Actually, I'd like to take credit, but we actually had the DNR come in and they did a really nice presentation.
They did. Yeah. And at that time, I believe the administrator said that he would be responsible for making the report, expensive report. Is that still going to be correct yet?
Unfortunately, yeah, I'll be the lead. I mean, I'll embark and work with our department heads, but yeah, I'll help facilitate getting the document done along with the committee. So, but I mean, it's still going to be a joint effort between the committee and the department head as far as filling that out.
Did I hear you say you were responsible for that report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Dave.
Actually, the noise is up front there. The scratchiness. Remind us, because I don't remember back then, remind us on this scorecard, what happened. I mean, I go through a lot of the listed items. I see a lot of items that, you know, are basically impossible to be met at a county level. As a city, different story. Things like transit, fairly easy to work with in their world. Where does this sit as far as any potential complications for any development? One of them I'm seeing is like large employers seeking rezoning to provide subsidized transit. You know, that's realistically unlikely in Door County. Where does this report fit within the future aspects of our county?
We have met with the DNR in regards to it. The report itself is filed each year, and there's no penalty to hard performing. Again, it's a report that just kind of it tells you where you're at, you submit it. And then if you're looking for assistance in certain areas, the Green Tier program can try to have you work with other communities or their staff to improve in those areas you're trying to target. In terms of anything that's, I guess, would hold you back in terms of projects, there's nothing there in terms of a hammer's analogy to prevent something. The only thing that we've been told is that there are more and more programs within the DNR and other 8 state agencies that are actually recognizing Green Tier as an additional incentive if you are a Green Tier community. So I guess I don't see the negative side in terms of anything that would hold us back in terms of projects. And there is some advantage in terms of I guess, an additional point or two on application.
Yeah, and that's what I'm seeing here from what I remember. I'm not exactly a big user of electricity myself or energy in general. I really try to be fairly efficient, but I'm looking at these impact things. I can see all sorts of businesses being annoyed if we tried to implement something, road impact fees, vehicle idling banning, stuff like that. Make me kind of nervous when I see some of these items listed here. And I could easily see some of our businesses being rather concerned when they see, if they ever see this list and see implications occur from that. That's my 2 cents.
Right, Tom. I would just comment that I think that the overall score sheet is looking at if you're going to recommend the very best possible potential thing you could do over the next 50 years to be more sustainable, the list is inclusive. It doesn't mean that you're going to check all those boxes or even try to check all those boxes. It's just a resource as a listing of possibilities.
Susan?
I just have a request. Assuming we pass this, there are all kinds of acronyms here, DHG, PACE, EBO, there's all kinds of, is there a glossary that goes with this that at some point, if we're doing this, could be included so we know what the heck it's about?
Sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else? This one does not involve any finances at the moment, so we're going to do this on a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Resolution 2020-60, purchase of asphalt plant automation control upgrades, highway and airport department. Roy?
I move to approve resolution number 2020-60, purchase of asphalt plant automation control upgrades.
I'll second that.
I know John had to step up, but I can give just a brief background. Again, we're looking at doing some automated controls, which control the operations out of the asphalt mix plant. The way that works, we're trying to get in I guess what they consider the work queue of being able to have that company come out and install that. Our goal is to have that done prior to our next season. So that's why we're actually trying to bring it forward now, because we like to make the acquisition. That way it can be done and programmed in fall and hopefully early winter, so that way it's done and completed. Again, part of the question that came up both at highway and also finances, again, should have followed the budget process in terms of going that way. And again, it was discussed, but they felt it was important enough to try to make this a priority, because if we waited until the budget process and started first in January, there's no way of guaranteeing that the work would be done. Even in the first half of the year, just based off their work schedule was larger to the city contact.
Questions?
And this all comes out of the highways retained earnings for their operations as an enterprise. So we're not taking any of the funds from our government operations.
Right.
I'd just like to add that this is a system that controls all the workings of a hot mix plant. And it hasn't been supported by the company that installed it since 2007. So it's very adequate. This controls the speed of the drum, the amount of oil going in, the amount of gravel going in, the amount of the wrap going in. So this is a very important component that this gets installed prior to our hot mix season, because if this goes down, we're out for a complete season. So like our administrator mentioned, they expect to start the work in November, and possibly some of the bills might come in this fiscal year yet.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Now we will go to the vote. Let's pass on a vote of 19 yes, 2 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2020-62, capital improvement plans, 2021 through 2025. Nancy still here? Nancy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 2020-62, capital improvement plan. And I'm going to put this up to Mr. Audit to explain all the money.
So I second.
Okay, I will again try to be brief, but I'll at least cover the content. So again, this is our capital improvement program. Again, this is a planning document. It's not a budget document. So what we're considering today is the projects that have been, submitted and also planned for the next 5 years. And what we will do is that based off your input today, if, for example, if we would say yes, you're giving me guidance to build in those items into next year's budget. I guess as part of building the budget, if there's something that doesn't fit, I could still, in essence, pull it out. I have to explain it to you, but again, this is a guiding document of what we're trying to move forward in terms of our capital expenditures. The reasons why we do that, and most of the counties and municipalities do it, is what we try to do is we're trying to control our long-term capital improvements, and you're always trying to look and plan ahead into the future. And again, just because of the levy limits, we always try to stay within a certain budget amount. So when we see these projects come in, we try to make sure that we're going to somewhere be on target for those expenditures in the future. So it's a good, planning document in terms of how we're managing our expenses. So again, just to go through what you'll see that has the resolution just showing the adoption, but I'm just going to kind of jump through. The main idea or the sources would be, again, there's a series of tables 1 through 5 that shows you each year. I guess I will not go into the details of a lot of the items for the future years unless there's specific questions. And then there's some tables that gives you the cost summary by year, their funding sources, and so forth. And then after that, what we do is you try to include the background information for each one of those projects. And again, what we try to do when there's a project going forward, we either work with a vendor initially or at least try to get a projected number of where that is. So it's a little bit solid versus this kind of a pie in the sky type number. So the best thing to do is to go through at least the critical ones would be the ones proposed for 2021. And again, I'm on what's considered the cost summary by funding source by year. It's FYI 2021. And the way you'll see it is that the items in black are the items that were submitted originally by the department and included in the plan. If there were any things that was changed, you'll see them either changed in red or they're crossed out in red. We try to at least put down an explanation of what was done with that. So let me just walk through, it won't take me long. But for the airport, you're looking at the highway reconstruction. Again, most of that is federal funding. But again, there's a portion that we have to match as a 90-10 match. And that's the money we're setting aside. Off the levy is the 25. We have 200,000 set aside so far. So that's how that one works. Also, we're looking at making some improvements to the apron area north of the taxway G. That's $25,000. If you go into our highway, those are proposed road projects. Again, the highway committee can adjust those next year, but our target is to do so many linear miles of road each year. I believe right now our target's just around an 18-year cycle in terms of our road maintenance, which we're doing excellent on. But again, that represents the roads and the mileage that we're proposing for next year. If you go to facilities and parks, you'll see that there's the entrance gates for John Miles Park, along with the signs and the ticket booth. Again, that was postponed this year because we were looking at a potential stage and other uses of the funds. So in essence, we're just saying we're not allocating any more levy, we're just carrying that money forward. And we're just trying to show that it's still a capital project. The other two items, the government center elevator replacement, you'll see $50,000 placed under the levy portion. Again, unfortunately, we'll still need more money than that. It's much more costly, but we're looking at replacing this elevator. That's the closest to the county boardroom. It is very dated, and it's been recommended that we look at it. I think if you go through the plan, we're doing multiple years of set-asides before we actually, do the full project itself. The other item is the Justice Center booster pump replacement. That's at $54,000, and it's proposed for next year. And we're looking at alternatives for that, but that's what we think we'll need for that project. Emergency services, I won't adjust that one. Again, we went through that part as approving the project that shows you where those funds are from. So I'll go to the next page. The other item then for registered deeds is the registered deeds media conversion. If you're familiar with registered deeds, most of all their transactions are now digital. In fact, most of them being back are also digital, but there are a series of books that have never been, I guess, converted into a final digital format. So obviously we're looking at a proposal to do that. Carrie put together a plan and we should see that as a levy portion. With that being done, all of their documents in the register of deeds would be digital and available online. For the sheriff, there was a project of considering new body cameras. The cost for that was $161,567. They put that together as a proposal. It was discussed at public safety. There was a lot of questions related to it. And it's been discussed back and forth, but there wasn't, I guess, a clear consensus in moving that forward. So we're recommending that that get deferred to at least 2022. So you see that crossed out and taken out. Emergency management. Under that one, there was discussion and request by the town to actually have a tower installed at LaSalle Park. What happened is we referred that to CATS. They did some discussions on the need, and there was, through the discussions, we actually found out our Fish Creek Tower, it has tons of interference, and it's probably a higher priority is to have a tower at Fish Creek. So we had discussed that. It actually was discussed at finance, and what we decided to do at our recommendation from finance was to actually budget for the Fish Creek Tower in 2021, but then also then defer LaSalle Tower to 2022. So you actually see in 2022 that was added as a future tower. And then the last item was the remaining funds needed for upgrading the 2 rooms that I talked about earlier. Again, that was $100,000, but again, we're looking to use the CARES funding for that in 2020. So that was, I guess, crossed out as part of the recommendation. So then if you look down at the bottom, you'll see that our total 2021 CIP under the levy portion is $4.495 million. In 2020, that was $4.6 million. And if you're familiar with my budget model, I usually budget around a $4.6 million capital budget each year in terms of how we do our funding. So we're actually under, which is good news, about 3%. And the reason why in my mind, where we're trying to stay a little bit under is obviously with COVID, we're not sure where we are in terms of revenues. So again, I'm trying to be a little bit conservative in terms of what we're doing with our expenditures. So I think it's good to come in, I guess, under budget. Just really quickly then, I'm just going to go through the other tables as quickly. Nothing's really changed except you'll see the stuff in red where you see the body cameras in LaSalle Park added in 2022. And the other ones that don't have any other changes. I guess 2 things just to disclose that was discussed at finance, and I will recognize that 2 of them. One was the county under 2022, there's the county address sign replacement at 675 under the levy. Again, there's a lot of discussion on that in terms of whether or not we should do that. And what we're looking at for that project is the address signs that you'll see throughout the county. They're looking at replacing those with a double-sided sign. That started off where it was approved by RPC to be a potential project, went to public safety. They also approved it as a project. Then we got in discussions of the costs and also the costs related to COVID. So it was recommended to be pulled out by RPC. But public safety never took that action. So it was included right now in terms of the project. We discussed that at finance and they recommended that it be left in. Again, this is a funding document. The other thing that was brought up was just the procedures. And that's one thing that was, I'll say, is duly noted. Traditionally, if you look at the very back of the packet, I don't have the exact page, but it states that any of the projects should go through a home committee in terms of being, I guess, added on to the CIP itself. I guess, obviously going forward, we can continue to pursue that policy. But I would refer that part back to finance because I guess in my mind, I'd actually change that process because it's, I'd actually like to see the committees approve whatever comes out of this body in the budget in terms of what's going to be moving forward. Because again, if I take it to the committees beforehand, they don't have the idea of the big picture of the overall budget. So I'm duly noting that on some of these projects, they did not get in front of their home committees prior to it. But again, I think the proper thing to do is to consider the plan as it is presented, but then also refer that policy to finance and see if they would like to modify that policy for future versions of this document.
Questions? Okay.
The project number, remind us how that is developed. Looking at highway, it's 1-33-09.
Trying to see if Steve's on. The project number, I believe what they're looking at is, I think that's the department number, and then they sequentially number the projects coming in on the sheets. That's more of a finance or requires a project number.
Yeah, what I was looking for, as I mentioned at finances, I'd appreciate including somewhere the date in which this project got onto that list.
Oh, okay.
As we know, projects get pushed back, or plan 5 years out, and 6 years later, we push it back another year. And specifically, of course, those two that you referred to earlier, I just would like to know that they were placed on this list on 7 or year 2020, or just plain 2020 or something, so that could be put inside the description of the project. Some of this stuff has been pushed back numerous years, and it would be handy to know that 8 years ago, a different committee group, different board group, decided to do something, and now we don't understand why.
Definitely doable. Thank you.
So can we get that maybe even for next, when we actually go through the budget cycle, next time this thing comes back to us? On the newer items, obviously, the older ones are going to be difficult.
Yep.
That was where the other question I had was making it colorful. So the new one that I had this year were a different color on the sheet, but different black and white on the sheet, on it. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, we will move to our vote.
Yes. She looks like you.
Just like, can you check and see if your vote went through? It's showing not voted on our end. She's still there.
She's on.
Miss, are you online or available? Your vote's not coming through.
She's muted.
Oh, sorry. Let me unmute you 1 second. I can't unmute you. Just so if you can hear me, you have to unmute on your end.
It's her internet is spotty.
Oh, okay.
Text me.
Okay, that is passed on a vote of 19 yes, 2 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2020-63, expenditure of funds for 2020 budget for the 2021 Door County Fair. Nancy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to approve resolution 2020-63, expenditures of funds from the 2020 budget for the 21 Door County Fair. And maybe there's somebody from the fair board that would explain. I know they're having a big deal for the 125th or
Sure, you guys are stuck with me for the explanations today. I'm sorry, just with the timing. Tom was going to join us, but again, I guess what we're trying to do is be very transparent. So obviously we canceled the fair for this year. If you're familiar with the fair, next year would be our 150th fair occurring. So we're trying to make that, I guess, special in terms of recognition of that milestone. And what they're looking at doing is getting some larger acts in for next year. Obviously, those acts as additional costs. So what we're planning on doing is, I guess, maintaining within the budget process. Not going to look at they receive the same amount of funding for next year, but what they're trying to do is use some of the funds for this year that were not being used since we don't have a fair to book some of these larger acts. And again, many of these larger acts require that they are actually signing the contracts now. And in fact, some are pending even the approval today in terms of moving forward. But again, I was not comfortable without getting authorization from the county board and being transparent that we're actually spending money this year for next year's fair. So we brought it forward, both through the facilities and parks, just in terms of discussion. And we had a discussion with finance, and we thought the best thing to do is put it so it's documented on paper in terms of resolution that we're using funds from this year for next year, just to be fully transparent in terms of how we're funding the fair for next year.
Benny?
I just have a quick question as far as if the contracts have a clause to not follow through, we can't bring large groups of people together. Unfortunately, I wish that maybe wasn't going to be the case, but just wanted to know we're able to. Thank you.
And that's a frequently asked question. We certainly have that clause built into our standard contract, but if you want a popular band and they refuse to accept that, then the decision has to be made. Do you want to sign that band without that clause in it? So it really depends on negotiating power. We'll try to negotiate that into the contracts, but I can't guarantee they're going to be in every one because in some instances we hold greater negotiating power, and other instances the person we're contracting with us.
Anybody else? Dave?
No. Okay. So help me understand this then. We have a entity who budgets every year for their activities. Quite often you have to pay for contracts upfront. Again, understood. I was trying to understand the point behind why certainly understand that the monies aren't used and the procedure needed this year to allow them to be used in future activities. That is the budgeting issue. Is this more directly related to the fact that next year's activity, because of the nature of it, 150 years, are just going to be more expensive, so they want the authority to use these monies towards those expenses they would have had anyway?
Well, again, the acts that they're booking, I think they're looking at spending about extra, I think right now it's around 55 to 60,000 additional in terms of expenses related to the fair for next year.
So it's directly related to the increased expenditures for next year specifically.
Correct.
Okay. That's otherwise money would have been rolled over.
And traditionally they have, again, the fair has their funds. So traditionally on some of these acts, they could sign those contracts now and just use their fund. But based off where they are with their funds and everything that they're doing for traditional rides and the other vendors they're doing, those funds will be used for those. But these are, again, those larger contracts that they don't have the cash flow in relation to that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I keep forgetting. Some years back, we agreed to super fund the fair, if you will, for a 5-year period. Is next year the 5th year, or?
Yeah, so what we did is we put an initial model together of funding the fair for the next 5 years to find out where they would be fiscally in terms of being able to fund more themselves. So that's part of the discussion moving forward over the next year that we're going to have to address, because they've had great attendance for the past, 3 years, or strong attendance would be maybe a better way of saying it. But again, the overall, their cash reserves have not gone up significantly. So there's still one of those issues we're going to have to kind of wrestle through and have those discussions.
And some of that money, or maybe all of it, that they're asking to spend now, that $65,000, that comes from, there was no fair. They want us to allot them the money we agreed on so they can use it to bolster next year's fair.
That's correct.
Okay.
Anyone else? Right, we will go to the vote. That passes on a vote of 19 yes, 2 absent. Thank you. No new ordinances, no special reports, no business. Anybody have an oral committee report? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a member of the Lakeshore CAP Committee. The home office is located down in Manitowoc, and the director asked me to notify anyone in Door County that is struggling with paying their rent. If you're struggling to pay your rent or you're behind in a rent payment for your apartment or house that you're renting, there is money available. They received a $25 million grant to help people like that. And if you are struggling on your rent or you're behind, you should contact Lakeshore CAP, which would be www.lakeshorecap.org. And there is paperwork to fill out, but you can handle this over the telephone. They'll send you the paperwork, and if you qualify, you could receive up to the maximum amount is $3,000, which in many cases might cover up to 3 months' rent. If you're moving and you're going to be struggling to pay the rent and the security deposit, there's money there for security deposit as well as the rent. So again, www.lakeshorecap.org. There's help there for you if you're struggling to pay your rent.
Thank you. Brian?
Yes, I want to mention that the 2020 Door County Virtual Fair starts tomorrow, and it ends on Sunday, August 2nd. So if you go to social media, you will see quite a bit of events going on and telling you what's going on at the fair and who's participating. So something's happening every day for the next 5 days starting tomorrow on social media. So please take a look at that.
David?
As I understand it, the covers, anybody that ordered cases and that stuff for the laptops, PS department has them sitting out there. We have that, maybe not everybody will run at the same time, but they're
Megan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We skipped over new business pretty quick there. Can you explain to me what would be fitting to include in a new business and what would not, please? I've done a little searching on my own here online regarding Robert's Rules of Order, but is that something that supervisors can introduce?
The intent of the new business is for matters that might either be put on a future county board agenda or matters that you might have an interest in one of the oversight committees bringing up.
All right, may I add to new business then?
Sure.
All right, thank you. For anyone that is not aware, at the beginning of the last break, and I want the record to show this, Supervisor Fisher verbally threatened Supervisor Boltman, saying, if you ever pull anything like that again, you had better watch out. This is threatening behavior and language, and it should not happen or be tolerated, regardless of the level of contention and the work that we are doing. This type of behavior would certainly not be tolerated in other areas of the county system. And I would like to know what sort of regulations and controls are in place. And if they are not showing up, how do we go about drafting stronger ones? This created a very volatile environment when that behavior happened. As a result of it, I felt extremely unsafe in this room. Such behavior is a threat to the effectiveness of local government itself, and it should not be tolerated. It was unprofessional, and it does not foster civil discourse. It does not allow each of us to do the jobs that we have been elected to do. So if there's another committee that wants to take a look at what those regulations are, or if this needs to be on our next county board agenda, so be it. But let us show on the record that that happened and is inappropriate, it is unsafe, and none of us should have to be subject to that, whether it's directed at us or any other supervisor. And I would be saying the same thing had it happened to Supervisor Fisher.
Anything else on new business or referral?
Yeah, I'll rebut that. Funny that she jumps in the middle of it instead of goes to the beginning of it when Mr. Baltman said Sig Heil to me first. And I'm sorry, but I found that just so extremely insulting. And that's what happened. He said Sig Heil to me. Now, where does anybody get off doing that, Megan? Where does anybody get off doing that? If you expect me to just sit still and not defend myself on something like that, I'm sorry, then you're terribly mixed up.
Anybody else? Referrals?
I was wondering about the US Census and how it's extended to the end of October. And I know that we've talked about how Door County is not really, the rate of people doing it is not as high as it should. So I'm wondering if that's something that can be discussed.
You put that out. Anything other new business? Any other oral committee reports? Review committee minutes. Review vouchers, claims, and bills. Announcements. Next regular county board meeting is August 25th at 9 a.m. If you haven't seen it, the email that came out yesterday, the fall conference has been canceled. Any other announcements? Joe?
Mr. Chairman, you're talking about the fall WCA conference.
WCA conference has been canceled. They're still going to do something with the
Virtually?
No, with the business meeting.
Oh.
The day before. Today's meeting per diem code is 728.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further business to be transacted, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.